Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests, and fellow media enthusiasts, welcome to the Forward Together, the Metro Manila Campus Broadcasting Networking Summit, where the pulse of the broadcasting world meets the heart of innovation. It is with great pleasure and excitement that we are here today to explore the world of media and broadcasting, where creativity, technology, and storytelling converge to captivate audiences around the globe. So, let us ignite our imaginations, amplify our voices, and illuminate the path forward as we embark on this exhilarating journey together.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our panel discussion on global trends in campus broadcasting. I'm Faye, and with me today are the founders of Ramp Media Agency and International Student Broadcasting Championship. Just heard Philip Vinchulo.
Very nicely done.
Very
Yes.
nice. Very good. Are you proud of me?
Yes, you nailed
Very
it.
good.
Nailed
I'm happy. Of course, we have Anwen Barros.
Thank you.
Anwen Hai and Marcel Maray.
Nailed it. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll talk about campus broadcasting trends. Okay, I have a few questions for them, but I do hope that you have questions for them also. So first, the establishing of ISBC. What motivated you to establish ISBC?
Do you want to take this one?
Sure. We ourselves are lecturers of radio broadcasting and podcasting in our hometown of Perth, Western Australia. We've been doing that for over a decade, so we understand all of the complexities of campus broadcasting. What we found was that although our students were able to enter competitions around the world with their work, unfortunately, a lot of the competitions they were entering were very regional. So if it was a US competition, it was very US driven. If it was a European competition, it was based very much on what is happening in broadcasting in Europe. So we found that even though we were able to compete, we didn't necessarily feel like we were a part of the competition. And that's why ISBC was born. We felt that it was important for all broadcasting students in all parts of the world have equal opportunity to win championships. On top of that, we really wanted to make sure that we could help broadcasting students find their own place in the broadcasting landscape once they finish their studies. So we understand the difficulty of going from being a student to being in industry, and if we can in some way impact on that being easier, then we feel we have done our job.
Yeah, I think we're really focused on the student journey. The student journey is probably what we think about the most when we go through this process. And what I mean by that is when we look at the industry as a whole, we find that graduates often say to us, oh, we're concerned about employment outcomes, we're concerned about jobs. And the irony is that we're hearing from industry that we have positions, but we can't find the right people. It's not that they can't find people, they can't find the right ones. So the mentality that what we kind of ascertained was that there seems to be a communication gap between graduates and industry, and we are really focused on bridging that gap. Another thing is that we really want to make sure that there is an international response to what we do. So when we have judges, they are truly international. We have judges from Jordan, Dubai, Singapore. We have representation in Australia, New Zealand. I could go on. And the reason why we do that is when we have our colleges and universities go through the process of participating in ISBC, we want to make sure that it's a truly internationally reflected response to the feedback that you receive. It's also an opportunity to network on an international level. So our judges, you can find them on our website, and for example, they all have LinkedIn profiles. Networking is the key to our business. Networking is the first step to achieving your long-term goals. So we create an ecosystem and we create a community where students can collaborate and connect and inform and simultaneously create a networking opportunity as well. What we find exciting for us is when we will see students from South Africa talking to students from the US. organically. We didn't do anything. That there is the most rewarding outcome of ISBC. So that would be the way I'd look at it.
I would definitely say if anyone in this room is not currently on LinkedIn, get on LinkedIn.
Your thoughts, Mars?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. It's one of those things where networking, you don't know what you don't know. So you are making a lot of content, all of you guys. So there's no better way to get feedback than from people who are making content in the industry, but from other sides of the world and other sides of the globe, you know? So what I would say is feedback is an absolutely phenomenal motivator, and it truly does inspire some new content innovation. So as students, I don't think there's a time when you should get on LinkedIn. I think just get straight into it. And even if it's not anyone in, fancy Dubai or the US, get in touch with me. I can get you in touch with heaps of people. So I think if you're making digital content, there's no better time to get it out there on the internet and ask for feedback and start relationships with people in the industry already. So
Actually, before we move on, that's a really great point. I think one thing I'd like to share with all students, there's this misconception that, I should start networking as I get closer to graduation, or I should do it. No, the moment you sign up is the moment you start networking. Your first year should be the starting point. And never be afraid to seek feedback. Never be afraid to seek, don't be afraid to put your work out there. Because the more response or the more feedback you get, the faster you get to your destination, because it's only going to make you better. And just remember, your fear of rejection or your fear of industry not liking what you hear, that is 99% manifested in your mind. And I'll tell you why. I've sat where you've sat. I've sat exactly where you are, going through the exact same experience. And I think it would be remiss or deeply concerning for anyone who represents the industry, in particular anything creative or media, to not recognize that. And if I had anybody reach out to me seeking advice, I would never not give it. I would definitely always provide a little bit of time for people that are about to walk a mile in the shoes that I've already done. So don't fear feedback.
Right. Yeah. No, this is this. I was just so mesmerized by what you were saying. Okay, but yes, that's a good thing about the internet now and LinkedIn. LinkedIn, because you have access to all these people and everyone else in the industry that you want to get into. And you can just get in touch with them and then just seek their feedback, seek advice from them, and all of them are on LinkedIn, so you can just easily just get in touch with them. Okay, so did you did get what you wanted to achieve with ISBC?
We couldn't be
And
happier.
more?
Yeah, and more. For a first year, it exceeded all our expectations. But we're not done. We really want to see a massive global movement. We want to see a community that exceeds all expectations. So yeah, we're just getting started.
That's what I was telling you earlier. I was telling him earlier that that's what I appreciate with ISBC, is that it's truly international. We have competed in IBS in the States, and that's what Anwen said, that it's very regional. So we were competing with North American student media organizations, and yes, we were winning there, but not quite. And that's what we really appreciate with ISBC, is that their panel of judges are all truly international. And what we really love about it are the feedback. So our station manager last year, si Chiki, she forwarded all these feedback from the judges to all our finalists, and they were precious. No, the finalists, they were reading the feedback, and they really felt good about what they were doing, and they had feedback on what to improve and what they're good at, and that I think that's the best thing about joining ISBC for the group, I think.
I think feedback's important. Like, I think if you're going to participate and put your work out there, the least that can happen is you find out what you did well and what you didn't. And it's always nice to get a pat on the back to hear what you did well. That's what motivates you forward. But also the insight onto how you can improve is what helps you go next level. And we're all about leveling up.
Okay, so the discussion is about global trends in campus broadcasting, and We're excited to hear your insights. Having visited Singapore and Malaysia and doing business in Australia, what insights can you share about student broadcasting now?
I think the biggest thing is understanding that it's an ecosystem environment. And the colleges that have adopted to understanding that it's a multimedia setup are doing probably the best work. If you are niche right now, it's harder. So when I see environments that create a holistic media experience, and there's that dynamic in a campus environment where broadcasting, digital, communications, there's like a 360 experience which kind of replicates industry. That is where I'm seeing the best outcomes. The closer we can replicate what's happening in industry, the better the outcome. So environment is probably the number one for me. If you can create the right environment, which is the closest replication to what you're going to experience, you'll probably exceed outcomes. That's probably my biggest takeaway so far.
Yeah, I think the one thing that has concerned me in recent times is the messaging out there. When it comes to traditional radio, yes, absolutely, I agree. People are not consuming radio the same way that they did 20, 30 years ago, but it doesn't mean that radio no longer exists, and it doesn't mean that radio doesn't have a place. It does. It absolutely does. But what we need to see, and we are starting to see in our campus radio stations, is, as Phil said, that ecosystem where you're actually utilising all of the resources that you possibly can to create this beast. And I got to say, I think UST are actually killing it. You guys have really nailed the ecosystem, so congratulations on that.
That ecosystem is incredibly important on being able to also diversify your skill set. Because if you are one-dimensional in today's current media landscape, it becomes a little bit problematic. You're pigeonholing your ceiling, your opportunities. So to be able to diversify your skills gives you much better outcomes in the current media landscape.
Well, certainly one thing that you and I have seen in teaching at a college level is that our students will come in with a very clear idea of what it is that they want to achieve with their career. So they'll, 90% of our students enter the building saying, I want to be on air. And then after their first year, where they learn all the different facets of the business, they actually quite often decide on something completely different, whether it's social media, like Marcel, or videography, or they might want to be a music director. But there are so many other facets to the business, and I think it's really important that you dip your toe in all of those areas before you decide what it is that you want to specialise on.
Well, I think it's an incredibly exciting time. This is, for me, audio and digital, and the convergence, for me, is the most exciting part. People talk about it as it's a problem. I'm excited. Think about it like this. If you go work for a broadcaster today, or you go work for a media entity today, your career can start off like this. I go in and I'm a copywriter. Then from a copywriter, I can then go pivot to being a producer. And then from a producer, I can become an on-air talent. And I don't like being an on-air talent, so I want to get into digital content creation. Then I've done my digital content creation and would like to get into management, so I'd like to be a content director. Do you see the progression? And guess what? You didn't even need to leave the building. You can stay with the one company and pivot and rotate. That is exciting. That to me doesn't look like a business that is shrinking. That looks like an opportunity and a business that is growing. It's just different. It's an evolution. And just in reference to radio broadcasting, that is the exciting part. It's an evolution. Radio has always evolved. They said video would kill the radio star, right? Didn't happen.
Sing it.
I'm a terrible singer. Oh, no.
I don't know the song though. It's just us.
Wrong generation.
But I think that's what's exciting, is that it's an evolution process. Radio is, an audio consumption is changing, but it's also recyclable content is doing some magnificent stuff in the audio space. And there's other areas now that are growing. So, we all know about, the beautiful things about online content, and we know about podcasting, and we know about, but now there's these new areas that are growing quickly, like esports casting, for example. That is a growing space. That is another new element from an employment perspective. If you would have told 18-year-old me that one day I could be an e-caster where I get to do basically broadcasting video games, I would have been practicing 20 years ago. That's exciting. And the other thing is, like, other areas like audiobooks are becoming a growing area. Now, it's definitely still in development phase in Asia, but in some other markets, audiobooks are huge. And that's another growing space. So audio consumption is just evolving. Radio is part of that process. The ecosystem is incredibly exciting. And that's why the colleges that embrace diversification, digital content, and how we marry it all together will have the most success.
I just want to touch on something that you've mentioned, which is the podcasting side of things. And obviously, Mars, you can speak to this a bit more than me. But I think it's really important that, we often think that podcasting is extra energy that we have to expel, that we have to go out of our way to create a podcast. And that's not true. You're already creating the content. Why aren't you turning it into a podcast?
Yeah, I think it's important to realize what kind of levers you have to pull. So if you're on the radio right now and you do a 5-minute break on something local, something you had for dinner last night or whatever, and you see a lot of buy-in in terms of comments and replies to your Insta stories, and you see people are invested in the topic, there's so many ways within the ecosystem now where you can actually share that content. So obviously you've got your traditional radio broadcasting. You can, at the end of your show, stay back for 20 minutes and talk about the topic at length with someone else. So now you have a podcast. And can I just say also about podcasting, it doesn't need to be an hour-long production. Like, this could be a 5-minute piece of audio content that could be shared as a podcast, and you get the same benefits from all these platforms. Another thing about the levers is obviously we have social media now. So you think TikTok, I can make a 20-second video on TikTok. That's one thing. That TikTok is then also a YouTube short, which means you get SEO benefits from that. And then also you take your longer form bit from your podcasting, and most people these days are filming their podcasts, and then you turn that into a full length YouTube clip, and there's more benefits for the brand. So you see how suddenly there's one bit of radio content that is now feeding all sorts of different machines, part of the media game. And this is what we like to call playing the game. You're feeding every service, you're benefiting from every service. And it all started from a little bit of radio content. So where you are right now, and can I just say, I was a student 8 years ago. I was in your chair 8 years ago, asking questions and wondering exactly where to go. And I can tell you right now that the future of media and the future of radio is so bright. So you're in the right place.
Marcel, just by listening to you, I have already produced around 5 short-form content.
Thank you. Let's work on it.
In my mind, I'm already
Yes.
editing it and
Yes.
with cutting
Fantastic.
points. Okay,
You
that's
jump in
one,
the studio,
2,
I'll
3.
film it. There we go.
Yeah, because you said earlier that when we were talking, right, that they were overthinking. They're just too much overthinking about podcasting.
Exactly. Yep.
It's very easy. This could be a podcast now, right? Okay. So, yeah, they're over-planning everything. This generation over-planning everything.
Overthinking is the problem. You think it
Overthinking.
needs to be perfect. That's where you're wrong.
Yeah.
How have you seen campus broadcasting change in the last few years?
Ooh, where do we start? I think there's been a lot of change. That's the exciting part, and change can be daunting. But I'd say the rapid convergence of digital content and its influence is probably the most significant. So, when I entered the industry, the change is quite slow because pre-internet, pre-social media, you have a situation there where there wasn't a lot of change, whereas now we're seeing things at rapid rates. Like, for example, the current love affair with TikTok. How many people have a TikTok account? Put your hand up. None of you have TikTok? You all have TikTok.
Yeah, come on.
All right, so where I'm going with that is that there seems to be a hyper focus on TikTok. Don't get me wrong, I think TikTok's amazing. Do I think it's a leverage platform? 100%. Would I be using it? 100%. The concern is becoming, and I've noticed this a little bit throughout Asia, is a hyper focus on that being the silver bullet, the one trick pony. My concern is if people overinvest in one platform, you're one algorithm away from a nightmare. One algorithm change, and all that work was for what? So my advice is to understand and appreciate the fact there's multiple levers, that our business is a ecosystem now of multimedia platforms, and that convergence is what has changed. The way we go about it hasn't really changed. It's just how we adapt and evolve with those platforms.
I think the biggest thing that I've seen is the change in attitudes. I know there's lots of discussion about Gen Z and comparing it to older generations and that sort of thing. But what I have noticed with the younger generation is that you aren't as willing to put yourselves out there. So you guys tend to worry a lot about what other people think, and you are concerned about feedback, as we were talking about before, and possibly a little less likely to leave the family nest to seek out opportunities elsewhere. So what I would say is, if you would like to make it in the media business, be brave. You need to be brave in every sense of the word. Put yourself out there and go and work in another country. Like, it will absolutely change your life. So experiences like that, you just can't put any kind of monetary price on it. It's priceless.
But what I will say about Gen Z, and what I appreciate about Gen Z the most, is its dedication to having a social conscience. You are hands down the most social conscious generation thus far.
Agreed.
And that is impressive, because if we're going to move the needle forward, especially in a social context, we need a generation to rise, and I think you're it. So if you guys can take...
No pressure.
Yeah, if you can take the advice that my colleague Anwen's saying and apply it to that social conscience, you could be unstoppable. Anything to add, Mars?
Be bold, be creative, don't hold yourself back. Everyone else already doing that for you. Be like a bullet and just shoot through whatever's holding you back. That's my best advice.
How is technology shaping the future of campus broadcasting?
If you're holding back making content for your campus because you don't have a campus camera, or there's no... I'm using an R6, don't judge me, all right? Yeah, I know you guys love Sonys. The R6 is pretty good. What I'm saying is, you don't need to wait till you have a good piece of camera, like a good piece of equipment. I'll tell you right now, in terms of money spent and the quality of your phone camera is the best you're going to get right now. You know, it's mobile. It's got multiple different zooms. It's got incredibly high frame rates. The export is really efficient for your laptops as well. So what I will say is, in terms of actually capturing content, it's never been easier. You have it already in your hands. You know, there's nothing holding you back in that front. Obviously, UST is very big in terms of TV production, so you have all these equipment. Look at all these massive cameras, and this is amazing. But in terms of pulling something out and just filming on the campus grounds, you already have everything you need. Now the only thing holding you back is the willingness to just ask someone, hey, what did you have for dinner last night? Let's talk about it. You know what I mean? That's what's holding you back right now. And technology-wise, is has never been more efficient, has never been more, processed. Everything is already compressed. If you really want to get technical, the camera in your pocket is the best thing you can have right now. And the reason most people at colleges are blowing up, you guys probably know Addy as well, Adrian. The reason he is doing so well is because he's just pulling out his phone and filming content. That's what it's all about. So what I will say is, the ideas is all you're struggling with. You have all the equipment you need.
I think the other exciting thing now is that we are experiencing also a period of long-form, short-form content. There's no right or wrong at the moment. You can do exceptional short-form or exceptional long-form, and you can find an audience.
Or you can do both.
Or you can do both. You can recycle content, cut it down, and have a great time. And I think that's probably the most exciting part of the business right now, is how we get to recycle content. It used to be a time period where you'd basically do a talk break and you'd never hear it again. Now you can basically recycle it on 4 platforms, add video content, and I can go on and on. So the recycling of content is probably what's been the most exciting, but it's how you recycle. It's how you capitalize on it. That's probably the art.
Based on global trends, what advice would you give students involved in campus broadcasting today? Aside from what you told earlier already.
Strive for collaboration. That is really important. Collaboration is an amazing way to network in itself. I see that there's multiple campuses here. I don't remember there being any kind of like contractual arrangement where you can't actually go and interconnect. I don't remember any contractual arrangement where you can't network with each other. End of the day, we're one global community. We're called the human race. So there's nothing stopping you guys from looking for opportunities to collaborate with each other. And I'd like to see that even on a international scale.
I was going to say, I'm pretty sure that both you and I have in mind as soon as we get home going straight to our students next week and saying, right, you need to speak to UST.
100%. And even our industry partners, all of our industry partners, I think, and this is the beautiful thing about the collaboration process, is that it leads to networking, which then leads to the possibility of achieving a job outcome. So collaboration and look outside the box, because if you have ambitions to travel, how can you possibly go into an international market if you haven't built relationships outside your own market? It's impossible. So the way you start that process is now. This is the most exciting time. You get to do anything you want right now as college students. You can experiment, no one cares. It's not a problem. You can experiment, and one good experiment can lead to an amazing outcome. And the worst case scenario is a conversation. Why wouldn't you collaborate?
Yeah, absolutely.
Good afternoon. I'm Melanie. I'm from Adamson University, particularly from Falcon Radio.
Nice to meet you.
Hi, Melanie.
Yeah, hi. As you mentioned earlier, that radio still has a place today. Do you think that in the next 10 years, it will still be alive?
I do. I think it's just evolving. It's just an evolution process, and audio consumption is changing. So it's not about, will radio be alive? And it really irks me when people of my generation are saying that. I get really frustrated because they're not actually looking at the landscape and understanding it. Yes, I appreciate that audio consumption and how we consume audio is changing, but it's not dying. It's part of a process now. And think about and we talked about recycling content. How can you recycle content if you're not creating it? So radio is becoming part of the audio consumption, which then can lead into a podcasting process, that then can lead into social media content creation. And by the way, we're all practically videoing every show that we do online these days, or every show that we do on air. So sometimes it makes me laugh when people say that there's a concern with the radio dying. It's not dying, it's evolving.
Yeah. Also, I think what is really important to note, and something that we've really noticed while we've been in Asia, is we've taken grabs everywhere that we go, right? And of every car that we've gotten into, and I can assure you that's a lot over the last 10 or so days, there was only one. There was one out of all of the rides that wasn't listening to terrestrial radio. So your old school radio. So what I would say is that unless tomorrow all of the cars disappear off the road, radio is alive and well. And I certainly don't think that we're all going to be beaming into locations in the next 10 years. So I think we're okay.
Yeah, and that's a great point. Well, there's cars on the road.
Yeah.
And here's the other thing, not just cars on the road, it's also about local content. The reality is I still want to know what's happening in my community. So I want my top of the hour news. Where else am I going to find it whilst driving my car to get local news? Where else am I going to get my local gossip?
When it comes to things like natural disasters, there is no other medium that can respond with immediacy. You know, TV is delayed. Everything else, newspapers, horrifically delayed. Online is even delayed to a certain degree. Radio, you can turn on the microphone and you can speak to your audience like that.
So for those reasons,
Yeah, I think radio will always have a place.
Hi, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I am Kyla from Tomcat UST. So for my question is, how does the global trends help the radio communication in campus broadcasting at present?
what I love about global trends right now is data. I'm a data guy. I'm a numbers guy. And, 20 years ago, ratings and getting data was subjective. You would put a bunch of rating books out in the community to get the feedback on who's listening, who's not listening. It was handwritten. Very, very subjective and not quite as accurate as most would probably expect.
And to be honest, a lot of that process is still happening
It's still
today.
active.
And it's not particularly reliable.
Whereas now with the data that's coming in through streaming and online content numbers, and then also using digital content through social media platforms and the numbers that are coming through there, you can really work out if your media entity, station or podcast or whatever it is doing well. That kind of data is real-time data too. The ability to have real-time data today, that is exciting. That is probably the bit about the global side of technology that I get excited about is real-time data, because you can work with that. And when you can actually now work out when a listener tunes out of a song. So for example, if there's a song playing and they're like get to a point where they actually leave the track.
So basically anytime Taylor Swift comes on
for me,
you.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm Taylor Swift out. Is anyone else Taylor Swift? Is that just a me thing?
It's just you, Phil.
Yes, my wife's a diehard Taylor Swift fan, so I'm basically like surrounded by 24/7. But jokes aside, you've got data now where we can work out exactly when someone tunes out of a song, which then happens that if a radio station can identify tracks that aren't working, they can create a more refined, curated playlist for their community. So I think data is my most exciting element.
For me, I think it's the opportunity that platforms like TikTok have presented. So, because we all know with TikTok, it's kind of like you throw a whole heap of stuff at the wall and you see what sticks, right? So you never know when that one piece of content is going to really hit and can propel you into the stratosphere of, views and followers and all that sort of stuff. So I think the opportunity to really have global reach is so much more now than it ever has been before.
And there's also one, I will say, with the work that I do for my job as well, is with all of this data that is at your fingertips. I think one of the more important metrics is the retention, and you can actually see when people are dropping off, like Phil said. But more importantly, on Instagram, you can see, and TikTok, for example, you can actually see exactly when people are moving on from your content, which then you start asking yourself the question, if I'm reaching people for the first time, because remember, you guys might be at university or college now, but you're fighting for the same attention online as companies like Nike. You're fighting for the same attention as all of these massive brands. So the question then to you becomes, if people are dropping off after 2 seconds, why is my content not engaging? Why does it not keep them for further than 2 seconds? So those are the questions you ask yourself once you have all of that data at your fingertips. So I say, to your question, I think right now and in the very near future, I think we're going to be very data reliant. And I think it's important to continuously reevaluate what you're posting. Because I'm posting a lot of content. I'm producing 30 short form videos a week for 8 different podcasts. All of them are #1 in our country. So I can tell you, posting all of that content, you live in the data and you look at the numbers, and you cannot switch off because you're continuously evolving the timeline, how your content is sort of performing, and as well, you work on your hooks. Hooks is everything these days. So I would say, in the very near future, I think pay attention to the numbers. More importantly, pay attention to the retention as well.
Because I used to work in commercial television, and we go by ratings, right? So we had to wait for the overnight ratings, or a day after for the ratings. And for television, it's the ratings. But now, for Tiger TV, we produce Tiger Rush, and it's a daily show, right? So it's a 2-hour show. And I would ask every EP, we always ask the executive producers after each broadcast, what was the peak viewer? What was your peak viewer?
And when was it?
When
Exactly.
was it? So
Yes.
oh ma'am, it started with 25 and then they started dropping off, or it would peak at around this time. Who was your guest? So and then I tell them that you base your other guests with this guest who did well. So yeah, very very interesting about data, and it's very convenient for them now to have all these data available to them at this particular time. So at a younger age, now even in this level, in the university level, they are already made aware of viewership, listenership, and all this data available to them, and how they can work it to their advantage, right?
Yeah.
We have a question from Tyler. Tyler?
So actually, I've learned from Ma'am Faye because she was my professor in our major in communication. That media is highly dynamic, so it changes over time, and there are certain fads and trends that keep on changing, and it's kind of difficult to be able to keep up with the trends. So for my question, what is the best way to maintain the sustainability of the content we produce in terms of catching up with the trends as of the current time, and not only being confined to the trends in social media? And how can we explore more of the contents we produce and ensure its sustainability?
It's on you,
Okay,
buddy.
well, this is on me now. In Australia, but in radio in general, we have a saying: content is king. So if you want to stay relevant to your audience, you have to know what they want. And to know what your audience wants, you got to keep posting content. So what I would say is, if the more content you are producing, with your stations or with your universities or whatever, again, jump into the data that we just spoke, and you can actually see your audience metrics. You can see if you're targeting more females. You can see if you're targeting under 25 and over 18s in that small gap. The good thing about knowing data like that is you can find out, you can make content for that group over a period of a week and see what performs best. So I would say, once again, we're very data driven, and to stay relevant is a great question, because you're right, the industry is moving. The entire medium of content creation, whether it's audio or video, is very dynamic, like you're saying, and it's true. But I think the more you post, the more information you have ready to cater to your audience and stay relevant and in their feeds.
The other thing I would say is that, let's call a spade. We are old. So,
Speak
for
for
us,
yourself.
it's
Dynamic.
true. It's true. So, being that we are teaching people how to do, digital video, all that sort of stuff, it's imperative that we manage to keep up with what's going on. Now, it helps that we have children, I'll be honest, because they walk around the house saying all sorts of words that I don't understand, and then I have to go and Google it and figure out on Urban Dictionary what they're on about. But it's one of those things where I think reading is really important. So I spend an awful lot of time online reading articles and checking in of, what's happening on social media trends at the moment, what are the algorithms at the moment, which direction is it heading, that kind of stuff. So I think you can do an awful lot of research yourself too to keep up with all of those things.
Trends are funny. Trends are subjective sometimes. I'm a really big believer in authenticity. I genuinely believe authenticity is what helps any individual reach where they're going. We always talk about having this relationship with the listener or the audience. You cannot build a relationship, irrespective of a trend, without that ability to connect. And you can only connect on that level through authenticity. So, although we've got all these other metrics, the best content that you create is from a place where you are being truly yourself. If you try to be anything other than that, then it won't resonate anyway. It doesn't matter what the trend is. You won't resonate because you're just not being you. You come across fake. So authenticity for me, outside of that, is what helps you elevate to a trending status.
And I think what some of you might have already seen for yourselves is that when you post on TikTok, you might spend an hour, 2 hours creating this masterpiece to put on TikTok, and it does nothing. And then you go down to your favorite restaurant and you just film, very authentically, and it does really well. So it's not about production values, it's about authenticity.
Connection.
Yeah.
Connection is what equals trends.
So thank you so much, first of all, for giving us the time to be here, and of course for the recognition that you guys have given to our university. It's really it's big on us for you guys to take the time. So for my question, sometimes content creation is a taxing job. Of course, you plan and idealize videos. Sometimes you don't know if that video will be appreciated by the audience. So what should we do if ever we feel that we have, this so-called creative burnout, and sometimes you don't know where this will lead us and all that?
You mean when you're hitting the wall?
Yeah.
Yes.
Mars, you want to start?
Yeah, sure. There's a lot of, everyone's different. Everyone reacts differently to it. I can tell you as a content producer, I'm not really the one on camera, I'm producing content, but one thing I can tell you from my end is you find inspiration, right? So if you're a content creator and you're doing a lot of interview style content, what I will do is find your niche on TikTok, search it, and just see what it has been the better performer. Whether it's the way you're delivering, whether it's how you're filming it, whether it's do you add a couple of shots of B-roll before you get into the interview, change up your hook, change up the text you have at the start. The first 2 seconds you have a bit of text for context. There's a lot of things you can change up, and I'll tell you the best motivator for any content creator is results. The moment you do something different and you wake up to 1 million views, it's happened many, many times for me. The moment you do that, you are suddenly invigorated to start making content again. So what I will say is find your motivator. Everyone's different. There's another one I'll give you is if you produce a piece of content that is so creative, it doesn't perform, but it just looks cool. That's something you put on your show reel. You make something like that you're very proud of, that'll motivate you from the future. So what I will say is it happens. It's incredibly common for people to get into that space where you think, none of this is worth it. I feel bored. None of this is working. You have a little internal motivator and that'll help you out. So I would say whether it's results driven, whether it's aesthetically driven, find your motivator and you will jump right back up.
From my perspective, I would say stop, breathe, and stop talking. Listen, because inspiration is literally all around you. If you actually take the time to listen what people are talking about, what they care about, what's really impacting their lives, then you're going to find inspiration in those places. We unfortunately live such hectic lives that, we're just go, go, go all the time, and we don't actually take the time to stop and listen to what people around us are saying. I think that's a really good way to just reset.
For me, from a content artist perspective, we can get incredibly fixated on the numbers. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's poor. Some of the greatest content ever created has niche followings. How many cult films were cult films before they became mainstream? How many artists start off independent before they go mainstream? The reality is that didn't mean that their content was poor. Actually, their content was really great. You know what they were waiting for? They were waiting for their audience to catch up. And eventually they come. So sometimes we get fixated on the number. Don't fixate on the number. Ask yourself, are you proud of that content? The number is subjective. The number is subjective. Who are you talking to? That's the most important thing. And as long as you can sleep well, knowing the content that you created, you're proud of, that is the most important thing. That is the number one. But one thing I'll leave with everybody here tonight is ask yourself one question. What are you famous for? If you can answer that question on what you're going to be famous for, it helps you with your content creation. It helps you with your inspiration. If you're going to be the best at nostalgia, be the best at nostalgia. If you're going to be the music guy, be the music guy. If you're going to be the best interviewer, then be the best interviewer. What are you famous for? And you can identify that. You can identify short, long form, what kind of platforms you want to use. So just ask yourself a question. What do you want to be famous for?
I just want to ask, as someone who became a podcaster as well back in June, that was my training ground for the sports industry that I entered into last year. I figured into myself that I am inconsistent into creating content because sometimes I wake up and I feel like I don't feel like recording a podcast. You know, and the taxing editing time that you have to make sure that everything's perfect and everything's smooth. There's no noise in the background. I guess my question would be, how do you keep up the consistency of the work that you produce, and at the same time, the quality is up there with your works?
Well, how many podcasts do you create a week at the moment?
Well, I'm working on 8 different podcasts. That is what I'm responsible for, and I do the video content, the social media distribution as well for those podcasts. And it's very common, once again, to feel, oh, why do I have to do this again? I will say podcasting is so broad. It's new, but it's already so broad in terms of you don't have to do an hour episode every time. You can do a 10-minute bit one time. What I will say is this, another takeaway from sport, because I'm working on our sport team, specifically sport content. And what I can tell you is sport has such a niche audience where if you're talking about a game that happened last night, you will find the people who watched that game last night. So it'll automatically be relatable. You're in a great spot where you don't need to fight relatability because people have seen the game. So what I will say is, Anwin actually gave some great advice, is that if there's creative burnout, that's the term for it. If you have creative burnout, stop and take a beat. That's great. I should actually take that advice a bit more often, to be quite frank. But what I will say is you can change up how you deliver your content. It doesn't need to be an hour long. It doesn't need to be 10 minutes long. You know, there's a lot of ways to get the same outcome. But what I will say is consistency is always a good benefactor. So
Yeah, I definitely would add that consistency is super important. So I think it's easy to kind of lapse when you're in a space where you're not necessarily seeing a return on investment, right? So you're not getting paid to do the podcast. Sometimes that makes it harder to actually keep to the grind, right? Are you familiar with the term dress for the job that you want?
Not really.
Okay. So essentially, if you want something out of this podcast, that's the part that you need to focus on, is the outcome, not the journey that you're taking now, right? So, you know, we, at the beginning of last year, ISBC did not exist, right? We knew that we wanted it to exist. We made it happen. So if you want success, you've just got to go out there and you've just got to do it.
I don't know where to go with that. It's so inspirational. Stop it. From a workaholic's point of view,
Oh, geez, yes.
that's all 3 of us.
Yeah.
there's a moment where you may need what's called a balcony person. And this is another reason why I like the whole international community side of things. Sometimes you need someone outside of the market doing the same thing that you can connect with. Because when you're in the same market, you're worrying about the impact of sharing that conversation or sharing it. But if you have someone that's in the same position of you in an outside market and you can connect and talk about what you're going through or what you're experiencing, and you have what I call a balcony person, someone who's on the balcony with you, and having that chat, then you have the ability to express what you're feeling in a safe space, get some feedback, share that kind of like concern, and hop back on the horse. And I can tell you that I have balcony people around the world, and I also have people that consider me to be part of their balcony. And that is, again, another reason why networking, especially in the space of interest, is incredibly important. But there's nothing wrong with taking a moment. There's nothing wrong with it. And I'll be honest, I sometimes need to be forced to do that. I'm not good at it. But there is nothing wrong with taking a moment so you can reset. Resetting is a big part of what we do. Like, we do it every day in media when we're doing a talk break, when we do something online, any kind of content we create, we're always trying to reset it. Reset. Why is it different to the role that we do? Resetting is not a problem. That would be my advice.
Maybe my last question, but what's next for ISBC? What's there to look forward to with ISBC?
We're really excited to obviously return. That's the first thing. But we are seeing a lot of growth in the sense of more countries and colleges participating. I think that's exciting because as an international community, we want to, the more we grow, the more collaboration, the more communication, the more opportunity. And we keep saying that we want to be where talent meets opportunity. We can only do that with more and more involvement, institutions participating. The second bit that we're probably the most excited about is we're looking at growth areas and we want to go explore them further. So we touched on e-casting. That is a place that we think is a really growing part of the media industry. And esports is one that we're going to go and explore with a lot more depth and a little bit more analysis. Obviously, we're excited to seeing what the trends, we've talked about trends, but the trends and movements are in digital content. So as that comes in, what we're also noticing too is that the interest in ISBC, when we thought was just going to be typical media providers, is also translating into interest from like agencies. And that's really great, because if you've got advertising agencies and media agencies just interested in ISBC as actual media institutions, then that only heightens the ability and heightens the outcomes for potential students to connect on a networking level and potentially get a job outcome. So there's that, and then obviously we would like to probably look at doing some more summits on a much deeper, stronger level in the future. And I think that's where we're heading. But one thing you'll notice about us is that you'll find us actually visiting our locations. We will continue to cross around the globe, meeting wonderful people like yourselves, because this is what ISBC is really all about.
I will say that in year one of ISBC, we learnt a lot. So the process was obviously new to us, and we're not immune to feedback. We have several things that we want to change or shift or focus more on, as Phil was saying with esports. So yeah, we'll shake up the lineup a little bit and do things a little bit differently this year, but I guarantee it will only be bigger and better.
A lot more judges.
Yes, more judges. Yeah.
There's obviously, we have what we call parent categories. So obviously radio is one of our parent categories. Podcasting is another one, digital, and obviously esports. But can I just touch on digital and podcasting specifically? I think what can really help with entries, if you guys are starting to make podcasts this year, is if you can show where your podcast is being distributed to. So obviously another saying in Australia, content's king, distribution is queen. If you show where you are putting your content, number one, you're going to see better results. But secondly, with these international judges that work in media and that work in this space, if they see how invested you guys are in your own content, there is so much potential for, obviously a victory, number one, but number two, for potential job prospects. So what I will say is just the content you're making, try to keep always thinking about where else you can be putting it, how else you can be expanding on it, etc., etc. And also, any bit of content you do on social media as it is at the moment, all of it can probably be used as a content creator in our content creator category. So what I will say is just keep that in mind. Everything you make, every piece of content you're creating, there's probably a way you can enter it and possibly win an award. I
encourage everybody in this room and all your peers to register. It costs nothing to register. So please visit isbc.co. We're on all social handles. I'd highly recommend to add us on LinkedIn. Network with us. If you haven't networked yet and you've been a little bit daunted by the prospect of networking, I'm extending an invitation to network with me.
This is a great place to start.
So find me on LinkedIn, Philip Vinchulo. I'm not hard to find. If you struggle, type in ISBC, you'll find the three of us there. Start your networking today with us. And then we can build that together.
And just a quick note, when you do register for ISBC, it gives you access to resources. So we actually created a full podcast series last year that you can go and watch, which gives you plenty of tips and tricks in all of the different parent categories that we cover.
And they can be used not just for bettering your entries, but just bettering your product in general.
Correct.
So
Yep.
you can pay attention to that. But also, can I just say, in terms of networking and sort of reaching out for feedback, this is how simple it is. If you have an event for your station and you make a video of it, send it to me and I can give you feedback on that video. It's very simple. And that's how you start your journey. Then you reach out to me, you reach out to Phil, and very, very soon you have a list of contacts that you can reach out to at any point for feedback. So I would just recommend starting And obviously, when ISBC rolls around, our second season opens. We will obviously we are anyway, but we'll be extremely active. So at any point, if you need help with your entries, let us know.
Thank you for your generosity, Phil, Anwen, and Marcel.